There is a war being fought for your soul right now, and the battlefield is your daily choices, your deepest beliefs, and the values you hold most dear. But here's what makes this war so dangerous. The enemy has convinced you that his weapons are gifts, that his poison is medicine, and that his chains are jewelry. The lies your culture calls truth aren't just mistaken opinions or harmless differences of perspective. They are carefully crafted deceptions designed to separate you from the very source of life itself. Every day, you are bombarded with messages that tell you what success looks like, what happiness means, what freedom feels like, and what love should cost. These messages don't come with warning labels. They don't announce themselves as lies. Instead, they dress themselves in the language of progress, enlightenment, and personal fulfillment. They parade through your news feeds, your entertainment, your conversations, and even your churches, wearing the mask of wisdom while carrying the seeds of destruction. What the world celebrates as breakthrough, heaven often sees as breakdown. What culture applauds as liberation, the spirit recognizes as bondage. What society promotes as the highest good, divine wisdom understands as the deepest deception. This isn't about being judgmental or narrow-minded. This is about understanding that there are two completely different operating systems running in the universe, and they produce completely different results. Before we go any deeper into this revelation that could change everything about how you see your life, if this message is already stirring something in your heart, if you sense this is exactly what you needed to hear today, I want to ask you to do something that would help me tremendously. First, give this video a like, because that simple gesture tells me I'm connecting with what your spirit needs. And second, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We're building a community of people who refuse to settle for surface-level spirituality, and your subscription brings us closer to our goal of reaching our first 100 subscribers. Every person who joins makes this movement stronger. Why does this matter? Because what I'm about to share in the next several minutes will completely revolutionize how you understand the spiritual battle happening around you every single day. And I need you to be here for the upcoming content, where we'll dive even deeper into these life-changing truths. Take just 2 seconds to subscribe right now, and then let's continue this journey together. The problem we're facing isn't new, but its intensity and sophistication have reached levels that previous generations couldn't have imagined. We live in an age where deception has become an art form, where lies are crafted with scientific precision, and where the human heart is studied like a military target to discover exactly which buttons to push to make us surrender our souls willingly. Think about this carefully. Never before in human history have so many people had access to so much information while simultaneously being so confused about fundamental truths. Never before have so many people been so connected to each other while feeling so desperately alone. Never before have so many people had so many choices while feeling so utterly powerless to change their lives. This isn't coincidence. This is strategy. The lies your culture calls truth operate on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface level, they promise you everything your heart desires. Freedom to be yourself, permission to follow your feelings, liberation from outdated restrictions, the right to create your own meaning and define your own truth. These promises sound beautiful because they appeal to legitimate desires that God placed within you. The desire for freedom is from God. The desire for meaning is from God. The desire for love and acceptance is from God. But here's where the deception becomes masterful. The enemy takes these God-given desires and offers counterfeit fulfillments that look almost identical to the real thing. Consider how culture has redefined freedom. True freedom, the kind heaven celebrates, is the liberation of your spirit from everything that keeps it from becoming who God created you to be. It's the freedom to choose love when hate feels easier, to choose truth when lies feel safer, to choose service when selfishness feels more natural. It's the freedom that comes from being so rooted in divine love that external circumstances cannot dictate your internal state. Culture's version of freedom, however, is the absence of any external authority, the elimination of any standard beyond your own feelings, the right to do whatever you want, whenever you want, without consequence. The first leads to flourishing, the second leads to chaos. Or examine how culture has twisted the concept of love. Heaven's definition of love is sacrificial action for the genuine good of another person, even when it costs you something, even when it requires you to speak difficult truths, even when it means setting boundaries that protect rather than enable. It's love that sees people not just as they are, but as they could become, and is willing to walk the long road of transformation with them. Culture's version of love is emotional approval without accountability, acceptance without challenge, and support without standards. It's love that prioritizes feeling good in the moment over becoming good for eternity. The deepest level of deception happens in how these lies reshape your understanding of reality itself. They don't just change what you do, they change how you think about what you do. They don't just affect your choices, they affect your ability to recognize that you're making choices. They create a kind of spiritual blindness, where you can't see the connection between your decisions and their consequences, where you lose the ability to trace the line between your beliefs and their fruit in your life. This is why so many people today feel like they're living someone else's life, like they're trapped in patterns they can't break, like they're pursuing goals that don't actually make them happy even when they achieve them. The lies haven't just changed their behavior, they've changed their perception of what behavior is possible, what goals are worthy, what life is for. The enemy understands that if he can control the story you tell yourself about what it means to be human, he can control everything else. If he can convince you that you are nothing more than an animal with advanced reasoning capabilities, then animal-level satisfaction becomes your highest aspiration. If he can persuade you that you are essentially a victim of your circumstances, then passivity becomes your primary response to life. If he can make you believe that you are fundamentally alone in an indifferent universe, then self-protection becomes your driving motivation. But if you understand that you are a beloved child of the Creator of the universe, made in His image, designed for eternal relationship, and equipped with divine power to transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you, then everything changes. Your problems don't disappear, but your capacity to face them multiplies exponentially. Your pain doesn't vanish, but your ability to find meaning in it transforms completely. The lies your culture calls truth have created a generation of people who are educated but not wise, informed but not understanding, connected but not in communion, busy but not productive, entertained but not joyful, stimulated but not satisfied. They have access to everything except the one thing that could actually fulfill them, a living, dynamic relationship with the source of all life. The tragedy is not just that these lies hurt the people who believe them. The tragedy is that they've become so normalized, so embedded in our institutions and assumptions, that questioning them feels almost impossible. To challenge culture's definition of success means risking being labeled as unambitious. To question culture's understanding of relationships means being accused of being judgmental. To critique culture's approach to happiness means being dismissed as negative or outdated. But this is exactly where the battle must be fought, not just in the realm of personal choice, but in the realm of ideas. Not just in what you do, but in how you think about what you do. Not just in your individual decisions, but in the worldview that shapes those decisions. The enemy's tactics are sophisticated, multi-layered, and specifically designed to exploit the deepest vulnerabilities of the human heart, Understanding these tactics isn't about becoming paranoid or seeing evil everywhere you look. It's about developing the spiritual intelligence to recognize when you're being manipulated so that you can respond from wisdom rather than react from emotion. One of the primary tactics is the strategy of incremental compromise. The enemy rarely asks you to abandon all your values at once. Instead, he asks you to compromise them gradually, in small steps that seem reasonable in isolation. Each compromise makes the next one feel less significant. Each step away from truth makes the next step easier to justify. Each small surrender of your conscience makes the next surrender feel more natural. Think about how this works in the area of integrity. The enemy doesn't usually tempt you to commit massive fraud right away. Instead, he starts with small exaggerations that make you look better. Then he moves to minor deceptions that help you avoid uncomfortable conversations. Then he graduates you to significant lies that protect your reputation or advance your interests. By the time you're comfortable with major dishonesty, you can't even remember what complete honesty felt like. Another key tactic is the manipulation of your desires through artificial urgency and scarcity. The enemy understands that God placed desires within you for good things, but he corrupts those desires by making you believe that those good things must be obtained immediately, through any means necessary, without regard for the cost to your character or relationships. The desire for financial security becomes greed. The desire for companionship becomes desperate attachment to toxic relationships. The desire for recognition becomes ego-driven ambition that tramples other people. The enemy also uses the tactic of spiritual counterfeiting, offering experiences and beliefs that feel spiritual but actually lead you away from genuine relationship with God. These counterfeits are often more appealing than the real thing because they promise all the benefits of spirituality without any of the demands. They offer peace without surrender, love without sacrifice, wisdom without humility, power without service. Consider how culture has counterfeited the concept of purpose. True purpose, the kind heaven celebrates, comes from understanding your unique role in God's story and aligning your life with his purposes for creation. It's purpose that connects you to something infinitely larger than yourself, while simultaneously making you more authentically yourself than you've ever been. Culture's counterfeit purpose is self-actualization, the pursuit of your own potential for its own sake. The belief that your highest calling is to become the best version of yourself, according to your own definition of what that means. One of the most destructive tactics is the weaponization of your emotions. The enemy has studied exactly which emotional triggers will make you most vulnerable to deception. He knows that when you're angry, you're more likely to make decisions that you'll regret later. When you're afraid, you're more likely to compromise your values for the sake of security. When you're lonely, you're more likely to accept relationships that damage your soul. When you're disappointed, you're more likely to question God's goodness. So he creates environments and situations designed to keep you in emotional states that cloud your judgment. He floods your media with content that makes you perpetually outraged about things you can't control. He surrounds you with messages that make you chronically dissatisfied with what you have. He bombards you with images that make you constantly insecure about how you look, what you've accomplished, where you stand in comparison to others. The enemy also uses the tactic of overwhelming you with choices while providing no framework for making good ones. He has created a culture where you're told that all choices are equally valid, where the only criterion for decision-making is your personal preference, where the idea of objective standards for right and wrong is dismissed as oppressive or outdated. Then he sits back and watches as you exhaust yourself trying to navigate life without a moral compass, making decision after decision without any clear sense of which direction leads to flourishing and which leads to destruction. Perhaps the most subtle tactic is the way the enemy has convinced culture to redefine the very concepts that would expose his lies. He has made tolerance mean acceptance of everything except absolute truth. He has made compassion mean agreement with every life choice, rather than loving someone enough to want the best for them. He has made judgment mean any attempt to distinguish between right and wrong, rather than the wise evaluation of situations and choices that wisdom requires. If you've made it this far, it's because something in your spirit recognizes the truth of what we're exploring. Don't let this message stay only in your mind. Help me reach our first 100 subscribers by subscribing right now if you haven't already. Every subscriber counts, and your decision to join brings us closer to this goal that will allow us to continue creating deep content like this. Give this video a like if it's helping you see these spiritual dynamics more clearly, and share it with someone you know who's struggling to understand why culture's promises keep leading to emptiness. Your subscription isn't just a number to me, it's one more person deciding to walk in truth rather than settling for lies. And together, we're forming a community of souls committed to genuine transformation. But recognizing the enemy's tactics is only the first step. Understanding the problem doesn't automatically provide the solution. The real question is, what does heaven offer as an alternative? What does divine wisdom look like when it's lived out in a culture that has forgotten what wisdom is? How do you access the resources of the kingdom when you're surrounded by the values of the world? The first resource heaven provides is revelation. Not just information about spiritual things, but actual insight into the true nature of reality. This revelation doesn't come all at once, and it doesn't come without your cooperation. It comes as you deliberately choose to align your mind with the mind of Christ, as you immerse yourself in Scripture, not just as ancient history, but as a living conversation with God, as you develop the habit of asking in every situation, what is really happening here from an eternal perspective? Revelation changes everything, because it gives you eyes to see past the surface level of your circumstances to the spiritual dynamics underneath. You begin to see how your daily choices are shaping your character. You begin to understand how your thought patterns are either opening you up to God's influence or making you vulnerable to deception. You begin to recognize how your relationships are either drawing you closer to your true identity or pulling you away from who you were created to be. The second resource is supernatural empowerment. Heaven doesn't just tell you what to do. It gives you the ability to do what you know is right, even when every fiber of your being wants to do what's wrong. This empowerment doesn't eliminate the struggle, but it changes the nature of the struggle. Instead of fighting against yourself with willpower that gets depleted, you're accessing divine strength that gets renewed as you use it. This empowerment shows up in the most practical ways. It's the supernatural ability to forgive someone who has genuinely hurt you. It's the divine strength to speak truth in a situation where lies would be more convenient. It's the spiritual courage to walk away from opportunities that would advance your career but damage your character. It's the supernatural peace that allows you to rest in God's timing when everything in culture tells you to panic about your timeline. The third resource heaven provides is community, not just social connection, but spiritual family. People who are committed to the same values you're committed to, who will speak truth to you even when it's hard to hear, who will celebrate your victories without envy and support you in your struggles without judgment. This community doesn't happen automatically. It must be sought, cultivated, and protected from the influences that would corrupt it. True spiritual community is radically different from culture's version of friendship or fellowship. Cultural relationships are often based on mutual validation and shared preferences. Spiritual community is based on mutual commitment to each other's spiritual growth. even when that growth requires uncomfortable conversations or challenging accountability. Cultural friendships often enable each other's worst tendencies in the name of acceptance. Spiritual community loves each other too much to let destructive patterns continue unchallenged. The fourth resource is divine purpose. Heaven doesn't just save you from something, it saves you for something. Every person who has been touched by divine love has been given a unique role to play in the restoration of creation. This purpose isn't separate from your daily life. It transforms your daily life. Your work becomes a way of serving others and glorifying God. Your relationships become opportunities to demonstrate supernatural love. Your struggles become platforms for displaying God's power and faithfulness. Understanding your divine purpose doesn't mean you need to become a missionary or a pastor, though it might. It means you begin to see every aspect of your life as sacred, every interaction as spiritually significant, every choice as an opportunity to either advance God's kingdom or compromise it. Your purpose is lived out in how you treat the cashier at the grocery store, how you respond when your plans get disrupted, how you handle money, how you speak about people who aren't present. The fifth resource heaven provides is hope. Not wishful thinking or positive mental attitude, but confident expectation based on God's character and promises. This hope anchors your soul when culture's promises prove empty. It sustains your faith when circumstances seem to contradict everything you believe. It enables you to invest in eternal things, even when temporal things are demanding your attention. Hope changes how you interpret your current circumstances. Instead of seeing setbacks as evidence that God has abandoned you, you see them as opportunities for faith to grow. Instead of viewing delays as divine rejection, you recognize them as divine preparation. Instead of interpreting struggles as punishment, you understand them as training for greater purposes. These resources aren't theoretical concepts. They are actual spiritual realities that become operational in your life as you learn to access them through specific disciplines and choices. The question isn't whether these resources are available. The question is whether you will develop the habits that make them accessible to you on a daily basis. The pathway to victory begins with the recognition that you cannot transform your life using the same thinking that created your current situation. If you want different results, you need a different operating system. If you want to live by heaven's values in a culture that opposes them, you need to deliberately reprogram your mind, restructure your relationships, and reorient your priorities. The first discipline is the practice of sacred reading. This means engaging with Scripture not as homework or religious obligation, but as a living conversation with the God who created you. Sacred reading involves slowing down, asking questions, listening for the Spirit's voice, and allowing the text to examine your heart rather than just mining it for information to store in your head. When you read that love is patient, you don't just learn a fact about love. You allow the Spirit to show you where your love has been impatient and how that impatience has damaged your relationships. When you read that God works all things together for good for those who love Him, you don't just file away a comforting verse. You allow that truth to reshape how you interpret the difficult circumstances you're currently facing. Sacred reading transforms your mind from the inside out. It doesn't just change what you think about, it changes how you think. It develops spiritual intelligence, the ability to see situations from God's perspective, to recognize spiritual dynamics that are invisible to natural reasoning, to make decisions based on eternal values rather than temporary pressures. The second discipline is intentional solitude. In a culture that fears silence and fills every moment with stimulation, the practice of regular solitude becomes a radical act of resistance. Solitude isn't just about being alone. It's about being alone with God. It's creating space for the Spirit to speak to your heart without competition from all the other voices vying for your attention. In solitude, you begin to hear the difference between the voice of truth and the voice of deception. You start to recognize how various influences are shaping your thinking and feeling. You develop the ability to distinguish between emotions that are coming from your spirit and emotions that are being triggered by external manipulation. You learn to identify thoughts that are aligned with God's character and thoughts that are contrary to His nature. Solitude also allows space for genuine self-examination, not the kind of introspection that leads to self-condemnation or navel-gazing, but the kind of honest assessment that leads to repentance and transformation. In solitude, you can admit things to yourself and to God that you would never acknowledge in public. You can bring your real struggles, your secret fears, your hidden resentments into the light where they can be healed rather than allowing them to fester in darkness. The third discipline is sacrificial service. Nothing exposes the lies of culture like serving others with no expectation of reward or recognition. Culture tells you that happiness comes from getting what you want. Service teaches you that joy comes from giving what others need. Culture tells you that security comes from accumulating resources for yourself. Service demonstrates that true security comes from trusting God to meet your needs as you meet the needs of others. Sacrificial service doesn't mean becoming a doormat or enabling other people's dysfunction. It means looking for opportunities to use your gifts, resources, and energy to genuinely help others flourish. It might mean volunteering at a local charity, mentoring someone who's struggling in an area where you have experience, or simply being the person in your workplace who actually cares about the well-being of your colleagues. Service has a way of putting your problems in perspective. When you're focused on helping someone else overcome their challenges, your own difficulties often seem less overwhelming. When you're investing in someone else's growth, your own setbacks feel less devastating. When you're part of making someone else's life better, your own life takes on deeper meaning. The fourth discipline is authentic community. This means deliberately surrounding yourself with people who share your values and are committed to spiritual growth. It means being honest about your struggles instead of pretending you have everything figured out. It means offering support to others in their battles instead of just focusing on your own needs. Authentic community requires vulnerability, which culture has trained you to avoid. Culture tells you to present your best self, to hide your weaknesses, to project an image of success and happiness regardless of what's actually happening in your heart. Authentic community requires you to be real about where you're struggling, what you need, how you're growing, and where you still need to grow. This community becomes a safe place to practice heaven's values. It's where you learn to forgive and be forgiven, to speak truth in love, to receive correction without defensiveness, to celebrate others' successes without comparison or envy. It's where you discover that you're not alone in your struggles and that transformation is actually possible. The fifth discipline is stewardship of your resources. This includes your time, your money, your talents, your influence, and your attention. Culture encourages you to think of these things as yours, to use however you want for your own benefit. Heaven reveals that these are gifts entrusted to you by God to be used for His purposes and the benefit of others. Stewardship of your time means saying no to activities that don't align with your values or contribute to your purpose, even when those activities are popular or profitable. It means scheduling time for the practices that actually feed your soul, even when those practices don't produce immediate visible results. Stewardship of your money means viewing every financial decision as a spiritual decision. It means asking not just, can I afford this, but does this purchase reflect my values? Will this expenditure help me become who God created me to be? Is this the best use of these resources for advancing God's kingdom? Stewardship of your attention means being selective about what you allow into your mind. It means recognizing that every piece of content you consume is shaping your thoughts, emotions, and desires. It means choosing media that builds faith rather than fear, that promotes truth rather than deception, that encourages love rather than division. The sixth discipline is the practice of gratitude, not just saying thank you when good things happen, but cultivating a heart that recognizes God's goodness even in difficult circumstances. Gratitude is one of the most powerful weapons against the lies of culture, because culture's primary message is that you don't have enough, you aren't enough, and you need more to be happy. Gratitude begins with acknowledging the gift of life itself. Before you had any accomplishments to be proud of, any possessions to enjoy, or any relationships to appreciate, you were loved into existence by a God who wanted you to exist. The fact that you can think, feel, choose, love, create, and grow is an incredible gift that most people take completely for granted. Gratitude expands to recognition of the countless daily provisions that make your life possible. The air you breathe, the water you drink, the food that nourishes your body, the shelter that protects you, the relationships that enrich your life, the opportunities you have to make a difference. When you begin to really notice these gifts, complaints about what you don't have begin to seem petty and ungrateful. Gratitude reaches its fullest expression when you can thank God for the difficult circumstances that have shaped your character, the painful experiences that have deepened your compassion, the failures that have taught you wisdom, the losses that have shown you what really matters. This doesn't mean being thankful for evil or pretending that painful things aren't actually painful. It means recognizing that God is able to bring good out of every situation, even when you can't see how. What you just learned in these last few minutes has the power to change everything, but only if you stay connected to this teaching and continue to grow in understanding. If you still haven't subscribed to the channel, this is the perfect moment. We're on our way to reaching our first 100 subscribers, and I'd love for you to be part of this foundational group of people committed to walking in truth rather than cultural deception. Don't let the enemy make you forget what the Spirit just showed you about these spiritual disciplines. Give this video a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and be part of these first 100 who are building something special here. Make sure you're here when I post the next video that will perfectly complement everything we've seen today. The transformation that these disciplines produce isn't instant or automatic. It's a process that unfolds over months and years as you consistently choose heaven's ways over culture's ways. But the changes that occur are profound and lasting. You begin to experience the kind of life that Jesus promised. Abundant life. Life to the full. Life that satisfies the deepest longings of your heart. The first evidence of transformation is peace. Not the absence of conflict or difficulty, but the presence of calm confidence in God's love and faithfulness regardless of circumstances. This peace doesn't depend on having everything figured out or having all your problems solved. It comes from knowing that you are known, loved, and held by the Creator of the universe. You find yourself less anxious about things you can't control and more focused on faithfully handling the things you can influence. You worry less about other people's opinions and care more about God's approval. You stress less about timing and trust more in God's perfect schedule. You fear less about the future and rest more in God's proven faithfulness. The second evidence is purpose. Your life begins to feel significant not because you're important by worldly standards, but because you understand your role in God's eternal purposes. Your daily activities take on deeper meaning because you see how they fit into the larger story of redemption and restoration. Your struggles become meaningful because you recognize how they're developing your character and preparing you for greater service. You stop feeling like you're just killing time or going through the motions. Even mundane tasks become opportunities to demonstrate love, practice faithfulness, or serve others. Even difficult seasons become meaningful because you understand that God is using them to accomplish things in your character that couldn't happen any other way. The third evidence is love. Not just romantic love or family affection, but supernatural love that extends even to people who are difficult to love. You find yourself genuinely caring about the well-being of people who have hurt you. You discover that you can disagree with someone's choices while still hoping for their happiness. You develop the ability to speak truth that challenges people while communicating it in a spirit of love rather than judgment. This love isn't something you manufacture through effort. It flows naturally from your growing understanding of how much God loves you and how much He loves everyone else. As you experience more of God's grace, you become more gracious. As you receive more of God's patience, you become more patient. As you are forgiven more, you become more forgiving. The fourth evidence is wisdom. You begin to see situations more clearly, understand people more deeply, and make decisions more wisely. You develop the ability to recognize patterns and consequences that others miss. You learn to ask better questions, gather better information, and consider longer-term implications before making important choices. This wisdom shows up in how you handle relationships, career decisions, financial choices, and daily interactions. You become someone others seek out for advice because they can sense that your perspective is grounded in something deeper than personal opinion or cultural trends. You develop the ability to see past the surface level of situations to the spiritual dynamics underneath. The fifth evidence is resilience. You bounce back from setbacks more quickly, learn from failures more effectively, and persevere through difficulties with greater strength. You develop emotional and spiritual muscles that allow you to carry heavier loads without breaking down. You become someone who can be counted on when things get difficult because your stability doesn't depend on external circumstances. This resilience isn't the result of becoming emotionally numb or spiritually detached. It comes from being deeply rooted in truths that don't change when circumstances change. You feel things deeply, but you don't let emotions dictate your choices. You grieve losses fully, but you don't let grief paralyze your ability to move forward. The sixth evidence is influence, not the kind of influence that comes from position or platform, but the kind that flows from character and integrity. People are drawn to you because they can sense something different about you. They may not be able to articulate what it is, but they recognize authenticity when they see it. They trust you because your words match your actions and your private life aligns with your public persona. This influence creates opportunities to point others toward the truth that has transformed your own life. Not through preaching or pushing, but through living in a way that makes people curious about the source of your peace, purpose, and joy. Your life becomes a testimony to the reality that heaven's ways actually work, that God's promises can be trusted, that transformation is actually possible. The ultimate evidence of transformation is that you begin to reflect the character of Christ in your daily life. Not perfectly, and not without ongoing growth, but genuinely. People who spend time with you get a taste of what Jesus is like because His Spirit is actively working through your personality, gifts, and relationships. You become someone who brings light into dark situations, hope into hopeless circumstances, healing into broken relationships, and truth into confused conversations. You don't do this through your own strength or wisdom, but by staying connected to the source of all light, hope, healing, and truth. If this message has opened your eyes to see the spiritual battle happening around you, if you now understand the difference between culture's lies and heaven's truth, if you're ready to commit to the disciplines that will transform your life, then you need to do 3 things before you close this video. First, give this video a like, because that helps YouTube show this content to more people who are trapped in cultural deceptions and need to hear these truths. Second, Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're working to reach our first 100 subscribers, and every person who joins brings us closer to being able to create even deeper and more transformative content for this community. Be one of the first 100 who are building something beautiful from the beginning. And third, share this video with someone who's struggling to understand why culture's promises keep leading to emptiness. Maybe you're the instrument God will use to open their eyes to these liberating truths. The lies your culture calls truth will continue to assault your mind, heart, and spirit every single day. But now you know what you're facing. You understand the tactics being used against you. You have access to the resources heaven provides. You know the disciplines that will transform your life, and you have the promise that everyone who seeks truth will find it, everyone who asks for wisdom will receive it, and everyone who chooses heaven's ways over culture's ways will discover what abundant life actually looks like. The war for your soul is real, but the victory has already been won. Your job is not to defeat the enemy, but to walk in the victory that has already been purchased for you. Your calling is not to save yourself, but to live out the salvation that has already been provided. Your responsibility is not to transform yourself, but to cooperate with the transformation that God wants to accomplish in and through you. This is just the beginning. In our next conversation, we'll explore how to recognize and resist the specific cultural lies that target your particular vulnerabilities and calling. Until then, remember that you are loved, you are chosen, you are empowered, and you are destined for victory. The truth has set you free, and whom the Son sets free is free indeed.